World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity.
On Easter Sunday, the 27th of March 2016, World Jam Global Radio presents a night called Back Against the Wall. This is to be held at the Pride of Tottenham, 614 High Road, London, N17 9TA. You will be entertained musically on the night with the sounds of R&B, lovers rock, rare grooves and other genres of music. Your DJs on the night will be DJ Matt from World Jam Global Radio, DJ Romantic CT from Heart of Love Radio, DJ Laro from World Jam Global Radio, DJ Mighty from Vibes FM, and DJ John J.E. from World Jam Global Radio. There will be food available on the night, cooked up especially by the original Pan Man. So make sure you eat some food and burn off those calories. So bring out your nearest and dearest for a trip down memory lane. Dress code on the night, smart and sophisticated. Doors open 9 p.m. and go on till 4 a.m. Tickets priced at £10 in advance, 15 on the door, will be available from the following outlets: worldjamglobal.com, located on the events page. Eventbrite.com, search Back Against the Wall. Booking fees will apply. Or the events hotlines 07802 30 24 50. Easter Sunday, 27th of March 2016. Back Against the Wall. Be there or be rare.
World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity.
I already did my time, I paid for my crime. I already did my time, I paid for my crime.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you once again for joining me, Kervin Julian, on World Jam Global Radio for another edition of Issues Today.
My time, I paid for my crime. I already did my time, I paid for my crime.
Just before we introduce this week's guests,
back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too.
When this case first was brought to my attention,
the street, there was not.
It stood me dead in my tracks.
Very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all.
The video got posted,
life is so sweet.
And I saw the figure of a black man up against a wall or a wooden background.
Change, man. Don't need no.
I heard the screams of a woman in the background shouting, "Put it down, put it down, for God's sake, put it down."
Trying to cope with this living hell.
Moments later, very few moments later, you heard the sounds of gunshots. Many gunshots. And another life went down. I was so intrigued by this, I had to investigate and find out what actually took place here. And what I discovered, what I uncovered, will be revealed on today's show as we look at the life and the execution of Mario Woods.
I never got how my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of.
Now you know, guys.
Now sit back and think
that I've spent a lot of time talking about some of these issues that relate to Black Lives Matter, police brutality, unlawful killing.
Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than.
But it seems to be a pattern developing in America where,
like a real alligator,
having a mental illness carries a death sentence.
Cases are going on right now.
Today we're going to talk about that and much more.
In prison.
Now,
already did my time, paid for my crime.
First of all, I'd like to say a welcome back to our producer Linda Sue, who's been absent for the last 2 months.
My time, paid for my crime.
Having some difficulty with some health issues, but she has rested, recuperated, and will be back in the hot seat, doing what she does best in the next couple of weeks. So we wish her a speedy recovery and look forward to her back very, very soon. Also, we really did miss
this is my message to all
my co-host, my shotgun rider, Dr. David Remay, And he's also been
Not a man I couldn't beat. I was
having a very serious health problem.
I was swimming.
Was very unwell last week, and in fact felt very unwell this week, but has managed to drag himself up for the cause, and will be joining us very shortly.
Man, don't need no gun in my
Also, our guest today,
shirt.
we have Mikey Blue here
Trying to cope.
from Filming the Police Portland,
Did my time. I paid for my crime.
and he's going to be taking us through some
Time. I paid for my
some vital steps. A in one,
already did my time. I paid for my crime.
ensuring that we make sure that we film the evidence,
Already
what to do once we've got it,
paid for my
and how it's been used to expose corruption and lies.
did my time. I paid for my crime.
But our prized asset today, our number one guest, is the legend that is Cephas Johnson,
But I never got how
CEO and founder of
what I had to do.
the Oscar Grant Foundation.
You. I had to repent. I must admit.
And I'm going to leave him to do his own introductions this evening or this morning or this afternoon, whatever time may be, wherever you are.
Do it again. I was young and
But before we go any further,
I was a real Forrest Gump.
I want to say a real welcome
Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common.
to
I was the real
my co-host, riding shotgun. It's hello to Dr. David Remey. How are we doing, David?
Hello, Kurt. Hello, Kurt. Hello, Linda. Hello, Sharon. Hello, Mijette. Hello, Staples. Hello, everybody. Blue hair. I am surviving. I've had so much Jewish penicillin. For those who don't know what Jewish penicillin is, that's typical that I'm growing feathers out of my head. But I'm surviving this, which rose years of the netherworld that Dante himself could not have had. We have in America today 3 very large spectacles. The first is a virtual royal memorial and funeral service for a big idiot who sat on the Supreme Court of the United States of America. A racist, a homophobe, a misanthrope, an Italian who didn't represent any aspect of that beautiful country full of art and culture. A man who saw the Constitution of the United States of America as a dead document, as something that is limited to words and their meaning of 1787. Can you imagine anybody so backward being so honored by the masses today? All I can imagine is that the Hollywood is not creating any movies. There's no sugar in the store, and people have given up sex. There's no other reason anybody would watch that big Roman Catholic huge event in Washington with all those bootlickers in attendance. The next thing going on today is Nevada has a caucus. I don't like caucuses. I think you put together your idea of how you're going to go vote, and you go vote. Don't go and have a PTA meeting or a Boy Scout meeting and have people put pressure on you and make you vote in public, and they threaten to come and put salt on your roses if you don't. Just go and vote and leave. Now they've got these caucuses, and feeling the burn has got Bernie doing pretty well. But we know what's going to happen, and that's a sad state of matters, but we'll see. Now in South Carolina, that state which Andrew Jackson threatened with hanging and then led the first shot in the Civil War. Imagine that state shot on a U.S. federal post, Fort Sumter, not because of bravery or courage or great ideals of freedom, equality, and justice, but to preserve that animalistic, primitive, pre-Neanderthal concept of slavery. South Carolina started the Civil War to keep people in the bonds and chains of slavery. South Carolina was the first state to have a police force to go and capture black men and women who wanted nothing more than freedom, to put them back on plantations, to use their labor, to enrich themselves, while running into the dirt those people who have every right of freedom and life as anyone else. Now South Carolina has an election today. And this election is going to have a big say over who the Republican Neo-Anthrothal Party chooses. Number one is Trump. Number two so far is the evangelical Israel beholding Ted Cruz, who went to Harvard, born in Canada, and may not even be eligible to be president, and married to a Goldman Sachs multimillionaire. And then you have a situation where Marco Rubio is trying to come in third. And if he comes in third or fourth, he's going to call that a victory. For some reason, coming in fifth in Iowa, third in New Hampshire, and third in South Carolina makes you a winner. Well, if Marco Rubio, who did not want to open up Cuba to freedom, if Marco Rubio, who's against integration of schools, if Marco Rubio, who is completely owned by the multi-billionaire Sheldon Adelson, who owns 80% of Israel's news media, who tells Netanyahu when to use the bathroom, and is the biggest Zionist anti-American I have ever heard of, if Sheldon Adelson teams up with Paul Singer, another multi-billionaire Zionist in New York, and then with this Miami car dealer, he's got all these Zionists from Israel supporting him and wanting to make him president, and he's nothing more than a 44-year-old Ricky Ricardo who can't find Lucy, and there's no love for anybody. Now, the other thing is Jeb Bush, the man who was born to be president, except his brother beat him to it, and is never going to be president, said, I'm running for president of the United States as my own man, except he's brought in mommy, he's brought in daddy, and he's brought in big brother, and he keeps crying to everybody. He doesn't understand why he can't get the crown. Well, the fact of the matter is he's got the ambition of Richard III of England and the courage of Richard's horse. And if you remember the Battle of Bosworth Hill, the horse ran away from Richard, or else he would not have said, my kingdom for a horse. Now, let me say something else. If we really care about Black Lives Matter, if we really care about equality of opportunity in America, if we really care about emptying out these for-profit prisons that have 4 million citizens more than any other country, the American gulag system, we will put all the pressure in the world on President Obama to name a liberal replacement of Judge Scalia. We have women's rights. We have school desegregation. We have the apportionment of districts. We have voter ID laws. We have the Miranda warnings. We have to control police brutality and prevent unions, as Lee Camp, one of our finest guests on this show, said on his show this week. Lee Camp said, the day when police unions get to tell the district attorney how and when police murderers, that is, policemen who murder American citizens, mainly black and Hispanics, the union gets to determine the circumstances by which they are interviewed and questioned, that day has to come to an end. When we have Roe v. Wade on the balance because of privacy versus equality issues, when we have fundamental issues of human rights, when we have a Justice Scalia who said, I am not concerned if a prisoner is executed in the United States because he is innocent. I'm only concerned that we followed the due process. And if the due process was legal, if it later turned out by DNA that he's innocent, that's not my problem. He has to be executed. That kind of thought process
that kind of disregard for human life, that kind of absolute anti-Americanism has got to end. And that will only end when the absolute authority, according to Marbury versus Madison, 1803, gives those 9 people on the Supreme Court the sole authority of judicial review of the Constitution. In any country, Carvin, in any country where a man can be put to death when there is evidence exonerating him, when that happens, that country can no longer be called civilized. And that is a country, even though it is one I wore the uniform of the United States on behalf of, that is not a country with which I can, in good conscience, associate. But it is a country for which I am willing to fight. And that is why, no matter what happens in South Carolina, in Nevada, or in that royal funeral procession of that big fatso creep from the Supreme Court, Scalia, none of that entertainment matters any more than Beyonce dancing in the Super Bowl. The only thing that matters is President Obama have the support, the confidence, the trust, and the love to give him the courage to fight like hell. Because never in history have we come to such a clear crossroad. Never again can we have a Supreme Court steal and an election when Albert Gore had 500,000 more popular votes than that unqualified cocaine addict, former drunk George Bush, who killed millions of Arabs, thousands of Americans, and betrayed this country. That's the way it is in America today.
Wow. And that's a slightly held back Dr. David Rumey on how it is in America today. Now, before we go any further, let us just introduce Mikey Blue here from Filming the Police, Portland. How are you doing, Mikey?
I'm doing quite well, Kervin. How are you?
Not bad at all. You just might want to update and remind the listeners, the audience, what it is that you do and your role here today.
Sure thing. My name's Mike Bluehair, and I run a Film the Police organization. Basically, it's a civil group that monitors police activity in public, and the idea is to film cops when they interact with the public and, document it, keep everyone honest. I've been doing this for 4 years now, and I run one of the more prolific cop watching groups in North America. I have one of the largest collections of police interactions with the public online. You can check out my work at Mike Bluehair on YouTube. So that's basically what I do. I don't just walk up and point a camera at them. I film the police in a very systematic way. I believe that accountability is in the details. When you approach a police scene, you narrate what you see. You call off the license plate number of the car, the cop's name if you can read it off their name badge, the street and the time. These are all very important details that a lawyer is going to need. And quite a few of my videos have actually been used in court cases to help people that were being falsely accused and whatnot. So that's basically what I do. Fantastic.
And it all will become clear as we kind of delve into this and open this case up. And most importantly, our prized guest of the day is none other than the current CEO, founder of Love Not Blood campaign, and also the CEO or former CEO and founder of the Oscar Grants Foundation, Cephas Johnson. Good evening, good morning, Cephas. It's about 10 o'clock where you are, or about 20 past 10 now, I think. How are you doing, sir?
I'm well, Kelvin. And again, I want to thank you for reaching out to me to share with your listeners some of the issues that are happening here, of course, in the United States, and of course, Senator Mario Woods and families that have suffered this heinous act of police terrorism in this country. First, I am affectionately known to the community as Uncle Bobby. I'm the uncle of Oscar Grant. Oscar Grant was the young man killed at the Fruitvale BART station on January 1st, 2009. As a result of that murder, being caught on video with this new technology that we have with cell phones, we were able as a family, along with the community and, of course, labor, to get the first officer in California state history arrested, charged, convicted, and sent to jail.
Amen.
Now that, yes, and it was very powerful, and that could not have happened without the support and the drive that the community here in the Bay Area, right where the Black Panthers was birthed at, being completely involved and so outraged, and that the protest, the rebellion, and everything that happened made that as a result. So I just want to thank you again for allowing me to share a little bit about who I am and what we have done. I am and was the founder of the Oscar Grant Foundation, which occurred August the 10th of 2010. And I released it to Oscar's mother, my baby sister, in July of 2014. And since then, we started the Love Not Blood campaign, which I am the co-founder along with my wife. And we expanded our work. You know, we carried on the same work, but we expanded to include community violence as well as mass incarceration. You know, and so, of course, what we do is we continue to deal with the issue concerning police terrorism, but our primary focus is first to embrace the family that has suffered that traumatic experience. You know, many of us come with the hopes that the police here in the United States is here to serve and protect. But once we experience that, we really begin to really clearly see that it's not so much to serve and protect, but it is to serve and protect the state and the state interests, not the people, but the state and the interest. And because of that is what we see on a regular, consistent basis, the high unemployment, health issues. You know, we could go on with all the degradation that has taken place here in the United States, that the state is protected by the police in that regard.
Cephas, let me interrupt here a minute. First, this is David. I want to say,
David.
Hello, my good friend Mike. I'm glad to have you back. Now, listen here, Cephas. I'm so proud of what you're doing with Oscar Grant Foundation for your nephew. I would like to begin a little bit, and I know Kervin has more pointed questions. I'd like you to first address something that concerns me. How does it feel to be a family member whose nephew or your daughter's son was shot down in cold blood like a rabid animal by the police forces of the United States of America? I want to know psychologically, you know, if I have a child who's killed by a drunk driver versus one who dies from leukemia, or one who's executed at a Huntsville prison in Texas versus one shot down in cold blood, I imagine a parent and relative has a different feeling in every instance. So I would like to know, how did that killing by the police of your nephew affect you as a human being in terms of your psychological worth and dignity?
Right. A great question. So, as I was saying, January 1st, 2009, my nephew Oscar, my sister's son, my baby sister's son, was murdered at the Fruitvale BART station.
How old was
he? He was 22. Old? Oscar Grant was 22 years old. And
was he married?
He was actually engaged to be married to Safina, who they have gave birth to a daughter named Tatiana. Tatiana, at that time when Oscar was murdered, was 4 years old.
So he had a child.
Yes, he has a daughter named.
They shot down a son, a nephew, and a father.
That's correct. A brother, a cousin, a friend. You know, right. And the result of that, of course, was the movie Fruitvale Station, which really drove into how Oscar was loved and how he loved community and friends. So for those that have not seen the movie, I would recommend that you see the movie. It is titled Fruitvale Station, directed by Ryan Coogler, the one who directed just recently Creed with Sylvester Stallone. Yeah. And the actor, Michael B. Jordan, played Oscar. Now, back to how it affects a family member. So when I got the news my nephew had been shot, I had no clue that it was by the police. And when I saw the raw video, because instead of me going to the hospital, all the family was at the hospital, I stayed home with my mother. And as we began to watch the raw video from the commuters that actually videotaped what happened on that platform, I lost the ability to stand, hear, see, think. And when I really came back, I was on the floor of my mother's house. And I remember coming up in rage, I mean, extreme anger, that type of anger that was going to be extremely destructive, not just for myself, but for anything that came in my path. You know, I was just mentally insane. However, I have to say, a common spirit hit me because I was able to text Oscar an hour and a half before he was murdered, because he was really heavy on my heart. And I responded to the feelings that I had about texting him, not knowing he was going to be murdered. And I texted him and I said, "Uncle loves you, God loves you, and God loves your family." And an hour and a half later, he was murdered. When I remembered that, it was a soothing spirit that hit me and told me that I must really make this issue so prevalent in the eyes of the United States and the world that we all began to take up a banner to deal with this issue concerning police terrorism. Because what I saw on that video, my nephew being murdered by those that I thought were here to serve and protect, brought to reality just how heinous this system is when it comes to protecting the state interest. Because immediately after Oscar was murdered, the demonization, the criminalization, and the demoralization of a human being began to take place, not just by the police, but by mass media and many in this society here in the United States that still harbor that real sick racism. So everything about Oscar was justified. And that was the painting aspect of what caused me to realize that how I had to bring who Oscar was as a person back to the world, how he was loved, how he loved the world, and that he did not deserve to die and be murdered the way that we saw on that video. So, and part of the work that we do, so that you can hear clearly, is that from that murder, I begin to engage every family that
Wait, Cephas, wait a minute. Before you go on to the next level, I need to understand something. Within your ability, my friend, within your ability, and this is a very tough question I'm going to ask you, can you describe for us what you saw when you got outraged? What made you go insane with rage? Tell us what exactly you saw on that video.
So on the video, Oscar was thrown to the platform floor. Right before he was thrown to the platform floor, he put his hands while he was on his knees behind his back to be handcuffed. Instead of handcuffing him, Johannes Mesley, the police officer, pushes Oscar down to the platform floor. While Oscar was on the platform floor, he, of course, you know, I'm not going to go into all the details, which I can. However, just for sake of time, he put his hands behind his back to be handcuffed while Tony Peroni, the other officer, had his knee on his neck. Oscar was saying he can't breathe, he can't breathe. He had his hands behind his back. He got 600 pounds of officer on his back. Tony Peroni is 6'1", 250 pounds. Johannes Mesley is 6'7", 270 pounds. When Oscar put his hands behind his back, Johannes Mesley stands up, pulls his revolver out his holster, and shoots Oscar's center mass in the back. It travels through his body, exits out of his chest, hits the concrete floor, bounces back up, and goes into his chest again, and collapses in his lungs. Of course, he died. The Johannes Mesley then says that he thought Oscar had a gun. You know, we hear this over and over and over. This, to me, was the most painting aspect of, again, justifying a murder that should not have occurred. And so the extreme anger that I felt from seeing an officer in the way that he shot my nephew was unbelievable. It was traumatic. And it raised in me an attitude of really clearly understanding this situation when it comes to black young men or young men when they encounter the police and what the end result is. And understanding that this system, by design, is working perfectly the way it was designed, is not unusual for a young black man to encounter the police to be killed on a consistent and regular basis.
Amen. Just one thing before I move on, and I really want to just thank you personally on behalf of Issues Today and all of our listeners, as we've really taken up an opportunity to humanize so-called victims rather than leave them hanging in the air as voiceless, without character, and for you to be able to share your thoughts and your feelings on your nephew. Because that's what he was to you. He was your nephew. He wasn't just Oscar Grant, the victim. He was your nephew, family member, somebody who you saw, some weekends and at holidays and stuff like that. And I just want to thank you for sharing that with us. Some people might go on to think Black Lives Matter and people who are activists in particular just have this loathing or hatred for police. But me and you were talking late into the hours of my time last night and early hours of this morning and the evening of your time last night. And one of the things that I asked you, and I'd like you to be able to say again, just so the listeners can understand the type of moral, principled upbringing of which you were brought up with. I would imagine that was not what you expected of your local law enforcement officers, the way that they treated your nephew, right?
That is clearly correct. I mean, just the way we were brought up, and our moral understanding of this world, and the fact that I even joined the United States military in a special unit to be anywhere in this world within 48 hours as a strike force to take out a so-called enemy. You see where I'm going with this, right?
Absolutely.
I was totally brainwashed to believe that this system was really upright and standing for real peace around this world, and have come to discover that the biggest domestic issue that we have right here within the United States is the killing of young black and brown innocent men all across this country. This is the biggest domestic issue that we have. It is very troubling. And to think that you could go into the United States military to represent this country as a peace-loving and safe environment with all the blessings that you can get by coming here is the ultimate lie.
Absolutely. Now we're going to just no. 1 second, David. I need to take a quick break. Do a Black History Month ad, and then we're gonna move and transition onto the theme of today's show, which is Mario Woods.
Hi, it's your friend Roni Canada here to ask you an important question about Black history. Did you know? Did you know that one of the most influential men of the civil rights movement was almost forgotten because he was an out gay man? Bayard Rustin organized the 1963 March on Washington for jobs and freedom, but was hidden from the public by the NAACP because he was openly homosexual. He was an early supporter of Martin Luther King Jr. and contributed greatly to his rise in the movement. He also contributed the practice of nonviolent civil disobedience he learned from Gandhi, which cut the mold for protests and marches into the present day. Rustin's influence in shaping civil rights movement, though largely ignored in his lifetime, was finally honored in 2013 when he was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama. If you didn't know, now you know.
World Jam Global Radio, this is clarity.
You know, I really struggle when I hear somebody passionately talk about something that is so close to their hearts. And it's why we try to get an authentic member of the family or somebody that's connected to a particular case to come onto the show live and talk about what they might know. Mario Woods, for those of you who are unaware, on the 3rd of December 2015, Mario Woods, a fatal raw video footage was filmed of Mario Woods being shot, executed by several police officers. And to most people, that video was posted on December the 4th, almost a day later, and it went viral. And to most people, all they saw was an individual shot dead by police, and many thoughts may have been entered into their heads. This guy could have been a gangbanger, he could have been a criminal, could have been a drug addict, could have been a troublemaker, he could have been anything. But today we want to talk about the Mario Woods that you don't know. And again, I'm going to bring back Cephas very quickly. What do we know about Mario Woods, Cephas?
So, of course, Mario Woods was a young man, 26 years old, who lived and was raised in San Francisco, California. He had some issues, and I didn't know him personally, but I do know his family. I've met many that know the family and have had conversations concerning who he was as a person, because it's so important for us to understand what happened and how this act was so wrong. It was an execution in reality of what happened to Mario. But he was a young man, a brother, a son, a community member that was loved by the people, real mild-mannered, and really the very next day before he was executed was getting ready to start his job with the U.S. Partial Services, UPS, and as we know, was murdered. This young man didn't exhibit any consistency of real criminality. He had some struggles in life, which many of us do in this society, and was put on this, what you call, to my understanding, this gang task force list. Once an individual is put on that, they're put on that for life, and they're put on these major restrictions like you can't go in a certain area, or you can't go back to your mama's house, or you can't go here, you can't go there, which can really become very troubling and disturbing to have you so restricted in a sense where you can't even embrace your own family. And so with those type of issues going on, and the fact that he had some mental issues contributed to the fact of him having some troubles in the society. But it didn't justify the execution that we saw that happened that day. And I think I have to say this so that we can get a clear understanding of the San Francisco Police Department. But broadly, the United States and how we see mentally ill people when it comes to encounters with the police. There's a report by the Treatment Advocacy Center and the National Sheriff Association that estimates that half of the people shot and killed by police in the United States have mental illness problems. As many as 1/3 of the officers involved shootings are attempted suicide by those individuals. So just in the United States, we have like 58% of mental illness shootings, whereas only 42% that are not. But in San Francisco, which is even more heinous than the national average, the San Francisco Chronicle analyzed and found that 60% of all the shootings by the San Francisco Police Department since 2010 was mental illness people. And KQED, who also had done an investigation of 51 officers involved shootings between 2005 and 2013, found that 58% of those people, again, had mental illness. And so not the United States, but San Francisco in itself has recently, I think it was in 2011, started a crisis intervention team where their training is so weak that with Mario Woods and all those officers that was unseen, there were 3 crisis intervention team members that actually had pulled their weapons out also, instead of utilizing the skills that they supposed to have been given and trained in and how to de-escalate, proceeded to also shoot, where Mario Woods was shot 21 times by, I believe it was 6 officers. He did not threaten officers. He did not, and it's, by the way, it's all caught on video for those that may have not seen it. Mario Woods, you can see the video for yourself. Is an example of what happens here in the United States on a regular basis. I mean, in 2008, DeAndre Bruson, you must see this video, was executed by the Compton police, and he was shot over 80 times. In the process of them shooting him, they accidentally shot their attack dog, the police dog. They called in medevac helicopters to evacuate the police dog, while DeAndre Bruson lay there dying with smoke coming out of his body. No attempt to resuscitate, no attempt to save this young man's life. And again, the young man was distraught, mentally ill, and executed. And this was caught on video. So these type of shootings that we see happening here in the United States is not new. What happened with Mario, but just a consistent repeat of what we see going on when it comes to police encounters with those that are mentally ill.
Cephas, let me ask you something. I noticed that the federal government under Loretta Lynch, Attorney General, is now investigating the police department of San Francisco, that department responsible for the death by shooting 20 times Mario Woods, that young man, 26 years old. I also know there's a young sergeant who works in that police force. Her name is Yolanda Williams. Excuse me. And a Blue Ribbon Commission has determined that the white police force of San Francisco is notorious for sending out very homophobic and racist texting over their phones. When she confirmed that, as the only police officer who had the courage, she's a black police officer, the only one who had the courage to go to the Blue Ribbon Commission, because the police union disencouraged, under kind of subtle threats, any participation with that Blue Ribbon Commission. She was suddenly threatened herself, and she now feels very worried about her personal safety. Now, the point of this is, when the San Francisco government decided to make a Mario Woods Day in honor of this terrible shooting, the police union chief came out and said, the city is insane to give a day to this thug, this animal, this thug, this animal. Tell me, how does that relate to the rage in the black community at having their youth identified as subhuman?
Well, it goes into the core and the fabric of the United States. We cannot forget that from 1892 to 1964, 3,445 young black men, female, and children were lynched. And out of that 60, I believe 60 plus years, only one lyncher was ever tried and convicted for the murder of a young black man, female, or child. One. So the black community is clear. The brown community is clear that we're dealing with a culture that does not see black people as human beings. The moment that we're killed by state-sponsored police, immediately part of the playbook is to then criminalize and dehumanize that individual. So if we understand this, and I'll share California really quick, in Oakland and into existence. In 1930 and 1940, the shipbuilding industrial took off because of World War II. So many whites and blacks came to the Bay Area to secure jobs. What Oakland did is went down south to recruit those white racist police officers to come and deal with the rising black population here. And they did, and they brought back this Jim Crow attitude, which created an adversarial relationship between the black community and the police department. And so in 1950, California State Assembly held the first in the nation hearing right in Oakland of hearing on police brutality in the city of Oakland, 3 hearings. And as a result of that, the 1966, the Black Panthers came into existence. And the sole purpose of the Black Panther was to begin to patrol our own neighborhood, to protect us from the police and their heinous act of beating and killing of what they were doing in that time period. And as we see, nothing has changed under the sun when it comes to this culture right here in the Bay Area, San Francisco specifically, in Oakland, in the attitudes of what the police do to us in our community. So the sentiment that the black community has is that this relationship is very adversarial, that this relationship is that the San Francisco police and the texting that they were doing was openly cleared to the world, and anybody can see this and then justify it if they want, texting concerning how they felt about black people in the community and how they viewed us and how basically we were called niggas and monkeys, and I can go on with the texting. Your listeners can go and review this for themselves. This attitude that the San Francisco Police Department has concerning black community and the relationship with the black community is extremely adversarial, and it's not because black people hated the police. We have respect for the police because we thought we were paying our taxes for them to serve and protect. But behind closed doors, they were always scheming and plotting and planning to either murder, incarcerate, or maim us in some form or degree under the justification that we were breaking the law. And in essence, what we find on a regular and consistent basis, and one of the speakers spoke a little bit about it, is that we have the biggest prison institution in the world, right? The United States is only 5% of the world's population, but yet has 25% of the prison population. In this prison here, which is 2.4 or 5 million people, over 60% are black young men, and of course the number rises when we include around Latino brothers and sisters. And so on a regular, consistent basis, not only are we being killed, but we're being incarcerated. I mean, this is real. This is our reality. Yes.
Cephas, let me jump in. This is David again. I'm the one who brought up the incarceration issue because I think it should be one of the three issues in the presidential election. You have a congresswoman in California, a black congresswoman. Her name is Ms. Waters. I'm sure you've heard of her. Now, yes. she said, and I'd like you to address this, that one of the reasons the police forces in your 3 or 4 biggest cities in California continue to keep the blacks poor and downtrodden is because they are the primary market for the drugs. And that if the black community rose up to middle class status, they wouldn't have the drug pushers, the runners, the clients. They wouldn't, one black man may be doing $500 a day in crack, but when you've got 5,000 doing it for the big boss, who's the white guy, who's up in the Nob Hill living in a $10 million home, that's where the money is going. And that they keep this like in World War II, the Nazis took Jews, and that's some of them were my family, and they put these Jews in concentration camps, and they made them slaves, and they produced things for the Nazi market, and the SS and the Nazis and the Germans became immensely wealthy off of that ghettoized concentration camp drudgery and slavery and torture and eventual death. And I'm wondering, in Oakland, San Francisco, LA, do the police forces not serve as concentration ghetto camp guards to keep these people, these black African Americans, in the market to make them rich? Do you understand what I'm saying? That any attempt that the black person has to seek justice is merely a breach in the wall that keeps those people wealthy. Is that true or not?
I mean, that's extremely true. I mean, historically, if we really just look at the historical aspect, and if I can do this quickly, when emancipation took place, it wasn't so much that Lincoln loved the black folks. He did it to save this nation. But right after emancipation, we thought, we were free. Black codes came into place. It took the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to deal with those black codes. And the reason why those black codes came in, because economics was involved in the issue of slaves being free. And so some kind of way we had to keep them in this servitude status. But right after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment took place, the Jim Crow laws came into place. Again, a direct attack on our ability to be able to function within this society. And of course, the murder of Emmett Till in 1955 and May May, the mother of Emmett Till, leaving the casket open for the world to see what this racism did and how the system allowed them to get away, brought about the 1964 Civil Rights Amendment. Now, I'm taking you to what I can address. So in Nixon and Reagan instituted what we call law and order, right after the gains of the Civil Rights Amendment. Law and order then the criminal justice system began to put in place laws that were so detrimental in our community that created the rise in the prison population. But in addition to that, crack was dropped in our neighborhood. We do not own planes. We do not own ships. We do not own weapons, not weapons in the sense that we make them. We do not bring all that stuff into our community. It's brought into our community. It's filtered out into the community. Drugs is given to those that are in the community to begin to try to find ways to survive. And so, of course, our community got contaminated by design to increase the prison population rate. And then, of course, investors began to build prisons with the guarantee from the government that they stay 92% full. And so they had to find bodies to put in these beds. They have to find bodies to put in this bed. And the target for those bodies to be placed in these prison cells, these gulags, are black folks and brown folks. So on a regular, consistent basis, right, the wealthy, the police department confiscate your goods, your homes, your vehicles, of any indication that you might have had something to do with some criminality. And from there, they take that and they sell it off, and all that money goes to the police department. It goes to individuals. Just in San Francisco alone, in the crime lab, one of their own police officers was stealing the cocaine. And not only just stealing it, but using it. And so what we have here on a regular, consistent basis is officers that are in our community that are planting drugs on us. And if you happen to be one out there in that life, stealing what you have or you having to pay to continue to do what you do, they're always benefiting from it. And this can be seen in the Ryder's case here in Oakland, where it was a $10 million lawsuit proving that the police officers were pimping, extorting, killing, murdering, and falsifying records and even arresting officers. Same thing happened in Los Angeles behind the group. I forget what they're called, but a big major case there where Raphael, I forget his last name, turned state evidence under reporting of the gang in San Francisco, police gang. When I say gang, I'm talking about the gang in blue, the police officers that were, again, extorting, pimping, prostituting, you name it. They was doing it all in reaps of gaining a larger income from the community. So what we see happening here on a regular, consistent basis is the state totally being involved in the criminality that is happening in our community for profit. And so we got investors on Wall Street. I mean, we got not investors, but we got prison investment on Wall Street, where you can invest in the prison system for gains of profit. So as much money that's being made. The biggest domestic issue that we have here in the United States is this criminal justice system. It is by design a racist criminal justice system. Institutionalized racism within the criminal justice system is real. And these mandatory sentencing law has taken the judge to come up with the excuse that he must adhere to the laws of the land, and thereby he cannot deviate from it. And thereby, if you just stole a pack of cigarettes and you third strike, you're going to prison for life. Sick. This is extremely sick. You got a rock of cocaine and a white boy got an ounce of cocaine. You getting 5 or 6 years where he might get 30 days. Total disparity in the treatment concerning the law. Maxine Walters is clear that that system is working that way, and she also reached out to the Department of Justice for us to come and do an investigation on the murder of Oscar Grant. And I want to say this, and then I'll stop. Obama in 2014 in December passed the Death in Custody Act. The Death in Custody Act says that every police department must report police shootings to the Department of Justice. Well, the new top cop, Loretta Lynch, stated that all the agencies do not have to report to such a degree. In other words, she's given a loophole. Instead of requiring that every agency, the 17,500 agencies, report to the Department of Justice every shooting that takes place, so that we can see the disparity in treating black folks and brown folks, is not required. I forget how she used the language, but it's not required to that degree because it would create so much work for the Department of Justice that she's leaving it to their own discretion. So again, what we have is police departments not reporting to the Department of Justice the act of their wrong police officers, those that are actually killing and stealing, or the murders that take place within their jurisdiction or within their little agency to the Department of Justice. So, I mean, the killings that we see on a regular, consistent basis, the Department of Justice has no record of it. You know, and it's one of the biggest, again, ills in our society where it needs to be addressed and there needs to be some accountability, and yet all the way up to the top, we fail to be able to enforce accountability when it comes to reporting these type of shootings to the American people.
Well, you know, here's the thing. We're going to be looking at criminal reform. We're going to be looking at prison reform. We're going to look at mass incarceration. We're going to be looking at unlawful convictions. We're going to be looking at abolishing the death penalty. All of these are future intended shows that we've got lined up, scheduled over the next few coming weeks and months. That's going to enable us to really unravel all of this absolute wonderful information that's coming out here right now. I want to kind of reel it back in and go back to the heart of the matter, which is the Mario Woods issues, because it's great to have an understanding as to how we got here, and the histrionics are absolutely awesome in that. But you know, when you look at Mario Woods, and I want to bring Mikey Blue here in for a minute, because one of the things that I really recognize for a lot of what you were saying as well, Cephas, was the fact that you know, the police for years have actually been getting away with this kind of murder, with this kind of brutality. In fact, for years, they've been able to just kill our black men, women, and children, and sweep that under the carpet. And for years, families have been mourning over the graves of their lost ones, their loved ones, without any form of accountability or transparency. But now, in the age of the internet, we now have a new tool, and the new tool is a smartphone, and a smartphone has a video, and people are now walking around and they're filming these interactions, and they're driving past. And I think it started off in my recollection with Rodney King. You know, but we've progressed so much since the days of Rodney King, and since that went unilaterally universal and got spread, went viral right across the world. And we now have people who are courageous enough to walk around with their smartphones and videotape almost anything as they go by. Now, Mikey, when you look at this Mario Woods footage, and you see the way that the police, or the whole way of that interaction, of that time frame that video is on screen, what do you make of that picture? What do you see? How do you describe that to somebody?
I see a overwhelming use of force that could have been prevented, that's outside the boundaries of almost every use of force policy that I've ever researched. So much is done wrong in that situation. It boggles the mind that Americans are so desensitized to this, that, oh, it's just another murder. It's just another. It's almost like, it's a step below entertainment. Like the Kardashians seem to be more important than people being gunned down in the street like they're animals or vermin. I do not see any. Here's the thing: the legal standards that cops are allowed to use lethal force. The first one is that the officer perceived a legitimate threat to themselves, or if that person presents a danger to the public, if they get away. Okay, they used beanbags on him that were partially effective, but only twice or four times. It's ridiculous. But first off, I want to say that this could have been avoided if, SFPD wasn't full of a bunch of sociopaths, for one thing. These cops are murderers, just period. Okay? Murderers should be in cages. They shouldn't be walking around with guns with legal protection like qualified immunity, and the policeman's Bill of Rights and these unions that back them no matter what they do. These people should be in cages. That's my thoughts on the matter. And to quote a classic, to quote Huey P. Newton, I mean, these pigs need to be dealt with. I cannot agree more with Cephas when he mentioned the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And I'm not talking about the new Black Panther Party. I'm talking about the old Black Panther Party. Okay, Bobby Sells and all those guys. Okay, the solution for this problem is not going to come from the police. They cannot be trusted to investigate themselves. It's not going to come from politicians. They can't pass any laws to make these people behave. It's going to come from the community. So there needs to be more community actions. I mean, if I were a person of color, I would go home or pull up on the internet, open up a new window right now, and Google the Huey P. Newton Gun Club. Okay, the Huey P. Newton Gun Club. Research that. I think everybody of all races needs to get out into the streets and start policing the police. The Mario Wood shooting was documented by, middle school girls from a Muni bus. Those are the videos that were shot. If it were experienced cop watchers, people that are doing this on the regular in a systematic way, the footage would have been, better, and you would have had more context, and you would have been able to bust these pigs and put them in cages. These pigs need to be put in cages. So that's my basic impression of what I got from that video.
Okay. Well, look, Cedric Smith told the San Francisco Chronicle he wasn't a big guy, definitely not a troublemaker. You'd see him around drinking a beer or smoking a cigarette, but he walked real slow and might have had a disability. He wasn't a threat to nobody. That was a local resident by the name of Cedric Smith, who spoke to the San Francisco Chronicle on the 4th of December 2015. And it has become clear that Mario Woods suffered from some sort of mental health and disability. My question to you guys, because I'm here in the UK, and the bottom line is, for many years we've been brought up to see America as our bigger brother, the bigger state, the bigger country that leads the way. But what I can't understand, and what my listeners over here in the UK fail to understand and comprehend, and what we can't see beyond, is in this country we have the Vulnerable Persons Act, the Protection of Vulnerable Persons Act. We have the Mental Health Act, which are all acts that protect vulnerable people and mental health. We have the crisis team. We have the armed response unit. And all of these organizations work in conjunction with one another to protect the well-being of another. So therefore, when you look at this Mario Woods scenario, I would have imagined that he would have been known by locals, whatever the reason for the police being called out. The moment they encountered him in an incoherent way, the immediate response would have been to call out somebody who was professionally expert in that particular area, that would have been able to sedate, medicate, subdue, talk him down even. I mean, if you've got a guy about to commit suicide and he's standing on the top of the building, right, they normally try to find the most compassionate police officer to go and stand up on the edge and try and talk this guy down. They're not going to shoot him off the roof, right? So here you've got this guy, whatever's going on with him at the moment, and the autopsy, which we're going to come to very shortly, shows that he was under the influence of some other stuff as well as whatever his medication might have been, or he hadn't been taking his medication or whatever. But he was definitely, from what I can see on that video, no threat to either the officers, himself, or anyone else. And yes, it's said that he, and the video does show that he has something in his hand, and you can't really see what it is, but I'll accept that it might have been a knife. But the knife wasn't pointed at anybody. He wasn't pressing it into his body. He wasn't holding it out like he was going to attack somebody with it. And I don't believe that there's any reports whatsoever that suggest that somebody called the police because this guy was actually threatening somebody else with a knife. So where do they arrive, and within moments of them arriving, feel the need to be in fear? In fear of whose life are we talking about here? Because 20 to 21 shots to take down a single individual. I mean, you wouldn't take that much shots on an elephant. So I'm asking you guys to explain to our listeners, at what point does anybody not see that this is an overuse, an exaggerated use of force, brutality, and almost an execution-style killing that the police cannot sweep under the carpet, especially with the new technology that is smartphones? And anybody can answer that, because I just feel like I've just had a little rant of my own.
Well, I mean, I think it has to do with the psychology of how police are trained in this country as far as something called use of force continuum. Okay, for one thing, police are taught that reaction is faster than action, meaning, or correction, reaction is slower than action, meaning that if someone is going to go at them with a knife or a gun, they're taught to believe that their reaction is always going to be slower than the person's offensive action. So it creates this culture of fear and reaction. They want to get there first. They want to get to their weapon first. There's something else too that's very pervasive in the culture of policing in the United States, and it has to do with something called the 22 or 21 foot rule, or the 21 foot reaction drill. And basically, police are trained that if someone is within 21 feet of them with a knife, that knife represents a lethal threat that can be brought against them in less than 2 seconds. They're trained that it takes about 2 seconds to close that distance and provide lethal force. So, and the 21 foot reaction thing is used in court cases quite a bit in justifying the actions of police. And when I was reading the excuses, the BS about why they initially shot him, they said that he was seen raising his arm. Well, last time I checked, you can't teleport across a room, or the knife's not going to shoot out of his hand and into the officer if he raises his arm. It's just ridiculous. Something else, the police's side of the story about what happened to this poor man, that they allege that he matched the description of someone that slashed someone in the shoulder that was treated in SFO, or not SFO, but San Francisco General Hospital there. And last time I checked, you're innocent until proven guilty. They've never proven that Mario Woods, attacked anyone with a knife. All they have is a police report saying that he matched the description of someone. What, black and in his 20s? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Something like that. Cephas, did you want to come in there?
I definitely can. It was, I had shared earlier concerning San Francisco and its crisis intervention training, which is CIT. So again, San Francisco basically started in 2011, but we have to remember with the Mario Woods execution, 3 of those officers had been through the CIT training. So it was not like we didn't have, or San Francisco Police Department didn't have anyone that had not been to that training. They actually had them there in that training. So it goes to show just what kind of training are they really getting? And if they are getting this training, what kind of feelings do they put behind the training? I mean, Mario Woods did not have to die and be murdered the way he was murdered. If there are true crisis intervention training officers on the scene that has really developed a concern and care for a black human life, then they would immediately recognize that he was disturbed and troubled, had some issues, and begin to proceed in conversation, whether it be in a low tone or some spoken tone, to not escalate but de-escalate. But what happened, as we know, is clearly that they didn't even escalate the issue. They just really decided to begin to shoot because of the perceived thought that this young man was threatening and was going to attack a police officer. And as we can see in the video, which speaks loudly to truth, and that's why cell phones are so critical today, is because we can record actually what we see as evidence to help the family get sadly, but at least a fair hearing on the fact that their loved one was killed wrongfully. Mario did not lunge. Mario did not in any way pose a threat. And because he was struggling, he was actually moving to get away from the officers, not in a running fashion, but walking. And an officer stands in front of him, and because Mario's walking that direction, he decides to open up and begin to shoot, thereby allowing the other officers to shoot at will, just like himself, so that they all can, claim this as a token of badge or an honor of taking down another black man. The training that, and I need to say this so that we can hear it. When KQED did their investigation between 2005 and 2013, they found that 58% of all those that were killed in San Francisco had a mental illness. almost every encounter in San Francisco with a police officer, they're dealing with a person that has been struggling on the streets. And it would seem to me that if there was any real concern about black life or homeless life individuals, that the San Francisco Police Department would begin to really emphasize the criticalness of de-escalation and crisis intervention training, so that they do not have to have this badge of honor in killing mentally disabled people on a regular and consistent basis. That's not in their culture. Their culture was built, as I was saying, historically, off this sickness that we see happening every day, and that is the irregard and the disrespect and the uncaring of black life.
You know, and that is systematic. Even just going back to what you talk about, the way that he was approached by the police and whether or not he posed a threat. Even in the code of practice for the act of mental health in America, which they have got one, all right, in chapter 15, where it says emergency applications for detention, this is what it says in 15.8. An emergency may arise where the patient's mental state or behavior presents problems which those involved cannot reasonably be expected to manage while waiting for a second doctor. To be satisfied that an emergency has arisen, the person making the application and the doctor making the supporting recommendation should have evidence of A. An immediate and significant risk of mental or physical harm to the patient or to others, B. Danger of serious harm to property, or C. Finally, a need for the use of restrictive interventions on a patient. Now, for me, there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever that at that moment in time when the police officers opened fire, that there was any of those things in play. There didn't seem to be any kind of talking down or communication with Mario to try and get him to open up in some way where they can build a relationship of trust and communication so that somebody could start talking to him and approach him in a more humane kind of way. And I'm not sure about you, but if I was stood there as Mario was with my back against the wall and actually having 5 or 6 guys with a gun pointing straight at me, I think it would be me that would be in fear of my life. I'm kind of not sure where the officers get off trying to justify that they were in fear of their lives, why they needed to fire 21 shots into the body of a man who was not in any way either threatening them or in a position to compete with their weaponry and firearms. Now,
David, may I add to what you're saying?
Yeah, go ahead,
This is David. I don't want to beat a dead horse, and Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I'm listening.
I have said this previously on this show many, many times. Once we invited the Israeli security forces to train American police officers, both by bringing them to Israel and by sending their officers here, we have seen an increase in this type of activity in our country. In Israel, they shoot people dead and say, oh, he had a knife. Oh, he had a knife. They drop a knife. They find a knife. They always get a knife. They had a knife. And I posted on my Twitter today a scene where a young boy, 21 years old, was shot 48 times by an Israeli officer, and then suddenly they found a knife lying 3 feet away from him and it had no blood on him. How is that even possible? And now in America, these same type of, and Israel is a whole different environment than the United States. It's a country in a constant state of war for numerous reasons, but it's in a war. We are not at war with our own people, but we are training our police officers in Israeli Defense Force methods. And the ones we are training are former military people of the United States who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and who were propagandized that these are ragheads, they're Arabs, they're Muslim pigs, they're not human beings. And you take these 18, 19, 20-year-old people, you bring them back home, you give them a military uniform that now says police department on it. They've got the same mentality. They've got the same weaponry. the same machinery with these militarized forces, again made possible by Bill Clinton. And what do? They go out and treat American people who are black or Hispanic as though they're Palestinians or ISIS or Iraqis. And until we can separate the police department from the military in this country, we will continue having police who see every American as a potential terrorist who has to be taken down like some kind of a rabid wolf. And this is the essential problem. And Mike Blue Hair and Cephas are doing great things. But the ultimate result can only occur, the ultimate result meaning an end to this, will occur with a judicial department that responds to the law and a public that is no longer immune from videos that show what is happening to our own people. And I am not so certain, and forgive me, this is the most terrible thing I've ever had to say. I am not certain that the majority of Americans give one damn what happens to a Mexican, a Hispanic, or an African American. They don't give a damn. If Jerry Greenberg or Ruth Bader Ginsburg's grandson, or if Justice Scalia's son, the priest, was gunned down, there would be civil war in this country. But nobody cares as long as they're minorities. And Mike, I want you to address at what point the videos become no more effective than common entertainment on TV.
Well, it has to do with context, really. I think people need to form cop-watching organizations in their communities. It's very easy to start a YouTube channel. It's very easy to start a Facebook group called Cop Watch and then the name of the town that you live in. Okay? And cop-watching organizations, when community starts working through mutual aid and starts working within itself to monitor the police activity, there you have context and a narrative that gets framed by the people it happened to, as opposed to the corporate media, which is complicit with these, police departments that are hunting people in the street like they're animals. So it has to do with context. It has to do with community through mutual aid monitoring their own police forces, because I believe it's going to come from the bottom up and not the top down. Okay, that's my thoughts. And also, you touched on Israel training U.S. police, and I could not agree more. We need to start sending our police to the UK for training. Okay, when someone has a knife in the United Kingdom, it's common practice. Okay, police, subdue subjects, disarm people with knives using pepper spray and batons all the time. In a situation that's really hard for the police to deal with, you guys use public order shields, which are these, basically, they call them riot shields in America. They're polycarbonate plastic, that you can't put a knife through. You can't get through with a machete. You can't get through with a spear. And they subdue people without killing them. It's common practice. So we need to stop sending our cops into a war zone in Israel and training them, and start sending them over to the United Kingdom for training on how to deal with people with knives. So I think it has two things. It has to be context, and narrative has to be framed and created from the community, and that can be done through community cop watching groups. All you have to do is Google cop watch, cop block, we cop watch, any of these groups, and a lot of them are already, in the town that you live in. You just need to start working with these organizations or form your own. And like I said before, the only reason why Mario Woods videos were out there is because of middle school students on a munibus. If you have systematic cop watching, I think the police are put on notice that they're being scrutinized. We can modify the police's behavior by making them know that we are watching.
Here's the thing, guys, right? Here's the thing. brought up in the UK, I actually can totally agree with everything that Mike is saying right now. We have situations here where you guys may well have seen on the news on several occasions over many years the absolute thuggery that used to take place on the football pitches, on the terraces and on the streets of Great Britain when certain rival football matches were taking place. And for a while, the police were at a loss as to how to deal with that, because they were always coming across greater numbers than themselves, and being overwhelmed in that, were having to literally stand back and let hundreds and literally thousands of guys just go at each other with hammers and axes and sticks and bottles and all sorts of stuff. And these things actually overspilled into different countries when there was World Cups or European Championships, and was making international worldwide headlines, where these thuggish football hooligans would travel. Some of them would be banned, but then some of them would smuggle in weapons, etc. But this thing carried on for years. It was endemic of our community and our society out here. But the police took on this, and it wasn't a military approach that they used. It was more a defensive approach. And Mike is quite right. So not just going on to the single individual that's armed with a knife. They were actually going into combat zones where there were literally hundreds and thousands of football thugs rearing to get into a real tear with one another, and they were using these plastic shields with bricks and all sorts of stuff and bottles coming at them, and they would just step forward in unison, regimental style, with their batons at hand and their shields in front of them and their helmets on their heads, so that their bodies were protected in order for them to move forward. And as they pressed forward, these people would press back, and those that didn't want to fight would disperse, and that would just leave a minimal amount of people for them to have to eventually take down, arrest. But in all of these combat areas, you've never once actually heard that out of those hundreds of thousands of people that were throwing bricks, bottles, that were armed with knives, hammers and axes and pickaxes and whatever, you've seen some police retaliate aggressively. You've seen individuals maybe hit, and even that's wrong. But you've not had the outpouring of deaths, murders, slaughters, executions, and loss of life, and serious injuries that what you've seen take place in America, where individuals who could have quite easily been detained or restrained in a much more humane way. And I'm thinking to myself, who's big brother to who here? Me and Cephas were talking last night, and Cephas said, in fact, you talk about us being your big brother. We see you as our big brother. And I agree with Mike. Maybe we need to stop sending the police out to Israel, or sending the Israelis into America to train the police force. Maybe the Americans need to start looking at alternative training. And no, not just the physical combat and responsive units, but also psychological training and the level of recruitment, where they recruit, who they recruit, and the criteria of the individual that recruits has to be primary, because you're actually talking about somebody who's going to be authorized to protect and serve, and with a gun in his hand has a license to give or take away life. Now that carries a tremendous amount of responsibility, and is not a job that should be given to just anybody. Now, bearing in mind some of the things that have just been spoken to, when you look at the comparable cases, I want to bring one or two other cases into the limelight if we can, right? When you look at what they did with Kelly Thomas, for example, I mean, this is another one that brought tears to my eyes. You know, there's a homeless man with mental health issues sitting on the floor, and the officer who comes up to speak to him arms himself with the rubber gloves first before he starts to pummel these punches into the face of this homeless, mental health related individual. And when you see the photographs of the autopsy and his body after he died, I mean, you can only recoil in horror that had that been your son or your nephew, or Cephas has witnessed this firsthand in his own family, and none of us are unfortunate enough to have had to experience that in such a way. But that's a terrible way for an individual to lose his life to an organization that people refer to as an organization that's supposed to be protecting and serving. I'm not sure what you make of that, but Cephas, do you honestly believe that that they're doing as much as they possibly can to look into how they can better serve their community?
Of course not. Right now, the Oakland Police Department has been almost under receivership, so that your listeners can understand what that means. When a police department in the United States have been investigated by the Department of Justice, and there have been some pattern and practices that expressly express that there's been some criminality within that criminal or that police department. The Department of Justice puts it in receivership, and it basically takes the command out of their hands, put it in the hands of the Department of Justice so that they can get everything in order. Well, in Oakland Police Department case, it was Attorney John Burrs and Chan who actually was able to get a judge to come in and make these agreements that within a time period that the Oakland Police Department would meet these requirements. Well, what I'm getting at is that these requirements that the police department makes or attempts to make doesn't really result in a change of the police department pattern and practice. On paper, it appears to look that way, but in reality, it doesn't. So I forget his position, who actually is working with the Oakland Police Department in bettering itself, made this clear that you can take is there any good model police department in the United States that you can take and have all the police department model themselves after? And he said no, because he does police departments all over the country. He said, but what we have is pieces here and pieces there that they might do good, and you can kind of makeshift a police department by putting this piece in place and this piece in place to get an ideal police department where maybe the whole practice is of good practice versus bad practice. So what I'm saying is that there is no police department that you can utilize as an example of good police practice. Not on a consistent and regular basis, and not throughout their pattern and practices in what they do out there in the field. In essence, the police departments are broken. They are working according to how the United States want them to work. And that is, and we got to always remember this, is that they're not here to serve and protect the people. The police department's here to serve and protect the state and the state interests. And once we come clear and understand that they're only concerned about the state interests and how they benefit versus whether there is a police department here to benefit and work for the community, then and only then will we understand where we need to go to unravel this sickness. So it again is that the police department are working exactly the way that they're designed to work. Laws have been written into the interpretation for juries to understand that an officer can have the right to perceive, think, or even believe that I was threatening to him. And because that language is written into it, it's hard to convict an officer. None is held accountable. And because none is held accountable, we have on a regular and consistent basis. And I think what Mikey was saying is so true, is that had not the commuters on that train witnessed an outrage of what was happening with Oscar, my nephew, we would have never got, for the first time in California state history, an officer arrested, charged, convicted, and sent to jail. It was because of the video. Yeah. We have to arm ourselves to begin to shoot back with video and record every incident of police action.
Absolutely.
So that hopefully that family can get some form of justice based on the video. But I'm going to tell you, even in court proceedings, the juries are informed that what they see in that video isn't actually what they see. So they try to tell you that your eyes can be deceiving because we're going to stop it and show frame by frame every single movement, thereby distorting the video so that you can give the jury the perception that the person that was shot in the video now was actually aggressively doing something wrong to justify the shooting. Language is being written today concerning how the jurors can interpret a video.
Yeah, I get that. Here's the thing now. In the UK, everybody working in particular areas gets a basic training in understanding mental health. And one of the first things that you're taught in understanding mental health is that everybody has a state of mental health. It's just that some have a better state than others. Now, one of the films that I do love, it's an old film, but it's a good film, is Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. And how that resonates with what I'm talking about is in me working in homelessness for the Salvation Army for many years here in the UK, in Coventry in particular, I've had to deal with many individuals that come through our services for various reasons, especially when you're talking about the first port of call for homelessness, which is family relationship breakdown. Right, and these guys, their wife has left them. They've had a falling out, and their first feeling is one of sorrow, of sadness. They're apart from their family, they're away from their family, and they're sad. And most of them resort to first port of call is alcohol in order for them to subdue themselves from this feeling that they're feeling, which eventually sometimes can escalate. Right now, this cycle just continues. Right. So the guy then falls out with the homeless shelter that he's staying at, and he might get booted out of there because now his alcohol has become too excessive and he's now becoming a bit of the pain, right? But all of this is because, again, hurting people hurt people. And while this guy's hurting, then he's going to be doing stuff that not just hurts himself, but will also hurt other people around him, until his behavior escalates to such an extent where he no longer cares about himself anymore. Now, here's the reverse. Once that person is treated with love, support, and the encouragement to re-engage with his life and community, and be reminded that even if this relationship that broke down might not work again, you can still function, you can still live, and your life can still improve. Once you get them to that place and they start to see this thing called hope, their whole attitude changes, their desire changes, and then you can start planting the seed of helping them recuperate and rebuild their lives again. So somebody who suffers with mental health doesn't necessarily mean that this person is going to be broken and a lost cause forever. They need help and assistance. And the bottom line is, well, the longer the police continue to go in and treat mental health individuals as if they don't matter and nothing that they do is relevant, we're never going to be able to get to the true cause of why this particular individual is going through a hard time right now. Because I think all of us can identify with going through a hard time at some stage in our lives. The only difference being is, not all of us resort to the level of brokenness that some of these individuals resort to, that finds themselves in that place where they find themselves, that eventually gets them on the radar of the police and other people and are killed. You get a rich white man, for example, who's going through this sort of difficulty. His family will quickly get him into some kind of care home somewhere, some kind of mental home somewhere where he can get some medication, and he can get himself into a rehab and get himself fixed up, and bam, back as if he was never gone. But not all of us are afforded that grace. Not all of us have that available to us. And so some people fall out of the loop more than others. But that doesn't mean that individual now walks around with a death sentence hanging over him. Because this is what we're seeing now with James Boyd, with Tony Lester, with James Harrison, with Kelly Thomas, with Mario Woods. These people all had mental health related issues, and every single one of them was shot down or killed by a police officer who should have known better. And for me, that's where the struggle starts. The struggle starts when we can start rehumanizing them, as Cephas did with Oscar Grant and with Mario Woods, and as we did with Tamir Rice last week. When we start humanizing them and making these people look like these things that makes people realize that these individuals matter, that they had a life, they had a purpose, they belonged somewhere, and someone is going to miss them when they're gone. And these videos that continue to highlight the mistakes and expose the embarrassment of the corruption of these police, we're fighting a losing battle. So the question has to be, right, what have we learned from these videos being brought in? What have we learned from the loss of these lives? What have we learned from all of these protesting? What have we learned with our activism skills? What have we learned that's going to help us put this problem right? What have we learned?
Well, I think we've learned that how ubiquitous the technology is and how fast we can post something to Twitter or to Facebook or to YouTube, that is having a very big impact on the collective dialogue that we're having in the United States. These videos go up faster than the news has time to, put together a news story or propaganda for the state. But I want to get back really quickly to the Kelly Thomas thing, because there's something on my mind. Okay, let's think about what cops are actually. Okay, I don't think it's a job. I think it's more like a welfare system for sociopaths. Okay, in what other profession could a person get a biweekly paycheck, a top-notch medical care package, a retirement that's comparable to a doctor for kidnapping pot smokers and people that are doing victimless crimes? That is creepy. I mean, according to some studies I've read, 1 in every 25 Americans is a sociopath. I mean, and okay, let's think about Kelly Thomas for a second. Okay, as he was being beaten to death by police, he yelled, "Dad, help me, they're killing me," 31 times. He said, "Please, okay," begging 30 times. "Help me, God help me," 26 times. He told the officers that were beating him to death, mind you, while there's a crowd of people standing around watching, "I'm sorry," 15 times. Okay, sociopaths do not access empathy the same way that normal people do. Okay, I think law enforcement is a job that a sociopath is attracted to. So, there's a common police tactic, in law enforcement training, and it's basically ask, tell, make. Sir, move your hands out of your pocket, please. Sir, get your hands out of your pocket, cussing and screaming. And the third thing, make. Use force. Most people, that aren't suffering from a mental health problem are going to de-escalate themselves at the force of this logical linear progression of force that they see the officer escalating through. But that's why people, homeless folks and people with mental illness and people on drugs, they're the anomaly. That's why there's more police violence wrought against them. It's because they don't act in a quote-unquote normal way. And the police are taught that their reaction is always going to be slower than the person coming at them. So they're more quick to jump to the weapon. So you have sociopaths in the ranks of police, and you have mentally ill people and people that are on drugs acting as the anomaly. And I think that pattern needs to be dealt with. We need to psychologically screen the pigs out of law enforcement. That would be one way to deal with this.
Absolutely. Cephas, I would imagine that with some of the meetings that you've had, you was telling me about the meeting that you had yesterday, for example. Do you see changes taking place in law enforcement that offers up hope?
To be honest about it, no. Not internally. The only changes that's going to really take place is what pressure the community puts on the police department as a whole to bring about those changes. These, arming police officers with cameras, lapel cameras is one thing, but not putting in laws and rules and regulations to hold them accountable for not turning them on or turning them off or gathering what they want and then allowing them to read or see the camera or recording before they write the report doesn't solve the problem. Officers are not held accountable for the wrongs they commit. And thereby, the only change that can show that real change will happen is when the peace officers' Bill of Rights is attacked and dismantled. The police department has the strongest lobbying group in the nation. Everybody fears them when it comes to political legislation. So therefore, nobody wants to talk about the police and the wrongs that they commit. So we have what we have intact is because of the strength of the police union. And I believe it was David that said earlier concerning the POA chief or boss here in San Francisco when he called Mario Woods a thug. They can say anything that they want, have the whole union bag them up, and the officers not be held accountable because legislation is put in place and not hold them accountable. As long as legislation is in place and where officers can't be held accountable, nothing we do to tweak this system is going to change anything. It has to start with the culture within itself. That culture, from the very essence of the creation of this country, is reaping sickness within the police department. This system, by design, utilizes the police department to serve and protect the state interests. And until we get that clear, nothing that we do at our level is going to change anything. All we can do is hope that the videos will give that family some form of justice. But what will change it is a mass movement, people doing like what you're doing, Kervin, and sharing this word with other listeners and having them challenge or be challenged to investigate for themselves. And as they investigate for themselves and begin to question some of these actions, like the execution of Mario Woods, then we actually have one more member to the mass movement. And as we continue to build this mass movement, we'll have a society recognizing that we have an agency, a police department agency, that needs to be totally dismantled and then brought back in where freedom, justice, and equality can be given to all.
Let me add
we got a lot of work.
Let me add that this is adding on to what Mike said, Kervin, that when the mentally ill are shot down, they receive less sympathy than a healthy person. For example, in America, it's well known by the Cornell University, they did the Roper report, that most people in America see mental illness as something that makes you weak, vulnerable, less entitled to civil rights. You're a dependent on society. You're seen somehow less human. And most important of all, it's a stigma. It's a stigma that people don't want to be associated with. The old idea of putting the mentally ill relative in an attic. So when a policeman comes and shoots down a mentally ill person, he has far less sympathy, the victim that is, than, say, a student at the university, a man in a car driving to work, a woman at home tending for her kids. They say, well, he's already weak. He's a burden on society. He's probably on drugs. The police had to do what he did because, he's mentally ill. He might bite the policeman or something. So until that public attitude about mental health changes in the United States and becomes a little more humane, the police are going to have free reign. It's like hunting season.
Absolutely. Listen, guys, we're going to take a break for about 1 minute as I do our very last Black History Sting. Bear with me. I'll be back with you in about 1 minute.
Hi, it's your friend Ronnie Canada here to ask you an important question about Black history. Did you know? Did you know that the first woman to be ordained as an Episcopal minister was also a major force in both the Civil Rights Movement and women's liberation? Pauli Murray was an activist, author, poet, and Howard University educated lawyer who, in addition to her ordainment in 1977, helped to form the Congress for Racial Equality. Murray was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus in 1940, 15 years before Rosa Parks' arrest sparked the bus boycotts in 1955. And she was the first person to openly challenge sexism within the civil rights movement itself. Murray was quoted as saying that one person plus one typewriter constitutes a movement. This statement and the example she set with her own life continues to inspire activists today. If you didn't know, now you know.
World Jam Global Radio, this is clarity.
Well, that was another informative piece of Black history, and we have been looking at Black history this month in particular because it is Black History Month in America and Canada. UK has Black History Month in October, but you guys have it there now, and which is why we looked at some prominent cases to expose on this particular month as we took a look at the Black history situation now. Cephas, are we there, my friend?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
The Black Panthers, you spoke about them at the beginning. Have been there chronologically, going through the decades, speaking up for the rights of black people, which you have been a civil rights operative within that for some time. Is this the worst you've ever seen it on the soil of the United States of America?
I mean, when we look at the numbers and look at it statistically, yes, this is the worst. And it's, from me doing my own research and from me dealing with this issue since the murder of my nephew, Oscar Grant. I've been an observer. I've been in, part of the movement, earlier in my life, but not to the degree that I am in today. What we see happening, just to give a quick example, just last year alone, I believe it was 1,500 people killed by the police here in the United States. No, I think it was 1,140. And if I remember right, the organization, The Guardian, is from London, I believe, that actually did this major report. And so, and knowing that, we know black people have been getting killed for a long time in this country. And we can actually estimate, and we know about a lot of lynchings that took place. But nothing is comparing to the amount of police killings that we see across the United States when it comes to black people being killed, and especially no one being held accountable for those murders. And so we had really here in the United States is at a state of emergency. This is no longer about you and I. It is no longer about our children. It is about our children's babies. Because if we think it's bad now for our children, when they begin to give birth and bring children into this world, our grandchildren, what kind of life and challenges will they meet? I mean, this heinous act has to stop, and it has to stop now. Verbally, young people here are falling back in love with themselves. Black people are falling back in love with black people. And black people now has come to realize that we have a right to life, we have a right to freedom, justice, and equality, and thereby we cannot expect the United States government to grant it to us. And so we must demand it, and we must take it. And that's where black people are at today when it comes to this issue concerning Black Lives Matter. We don't say that all lives don't matter, but we have to be clear. All lives do matter, but if black lives don't matter, all lives can't matter.
Absolutely.
Because we have to include black life in all lives. And it's clear that black life has been really challenged in our existence today by this heinous act that we see on a regular and consistent basis that actually has upticked since the election of Obama. It has become clear that racism is clearly here. It has been clear to us now, especially in these last 6 years, that there is a system that is systematically destroying black people, and matter of fact, created a genocide that has taken place that must be stopped at all costs.
Do you actually think, just before we move on, do you actually think with the level that America stands and overlords it over other countries and other nations around the world, telling them how they should live and what they should do and what their democracy should look like, do you actually think America actually has that position anymore to stand in a place of authority, telling others how they should live and what they should implement in their countries in order to make it a better place, when they've actually apparently got it so wrong on their own soil?
Well, just recently, January, the United Nations sent a working group here in the United States to go into the core or to the into the community to take the pulse of the sentiment that people of African descent feel about what's happening to them here in the United States. The United States has been exposed to total human rights violations, and this is being reported on a national, international level. And so, I mean, the United States still want people to believe that this is the land of the free and equality and all that is here, and what you're hearing is not true. But the reality of it is that people are beginning to question the United States in its perception of just displaying that in itself. So I do not believe personally that the United States is no longer in the position to portray themselves as, the best free country in the world, an ideal place to come and live because of the atrocities that we see happening on a regular and consistent basis. That exposure is even greater today through technology. That exposure is greater today because there are people coming in from different parts of the world asking the very question, what is really happening here in the United States, and what we are seeing, is it really true? Absolutely.
And going back to that, Mikey Blue here, do you believe that the introduction into all of these smartphone videos is the way forward to continue exposing and bring about the change that we want to see?
I think they're a one little piece of the entire puzzle. I think people need to have a consciousness shift in this country. I really believe what I said earlier. I think the solution is going to be bottom up, not top down. Okay, people need to start reacting to the Mario Woods shooting as if though it were their kid. People need to start reacting to Mario Grant or Oscar Grant being pinned down on the ground by those cops and shot in the back as if though it was their kid. So the video is one component. The cop watching organization is one component, but without the community behind it, it's going to get lost in a shuffle between cat videos and Beyonce, in YouTube or in the social networks. So cop watching, the video, how ubiquitous cell phone technology is, it's one piece of the puzzle. But there has to be more organizations like the original Black Panther Party. I mean, seriously. I mean, I don't remember all the planks, but I read years ago all the planks to be a Panther member, and one of them had to do with quitting and never having anything to do with drugs. During the formation of the Black Panther Party in the 60s, Reagan was governor of California, and it's come out. There's been white papers published on this. Our government was flooding black inner city projects with heroin to destabilize, to destroy black families, and to control black populations, to get them into the prison system so they could have slavery 2.0. Okay, so the filming, the cop watching organization is only one piece, but it has to be community involvement with cop watching groups. I mean, anyone can right now start a Facebook group about police accountability. Anyone, if you have a Google Mail account, you automatically have a Facebook or a YouTube channel. Yeah. Your Facebook username and your password is your YouTube username and password. I would highly recommend starting these groups and reach out to your neighbors across the street and you go, hey, why not we walk around the neighborhood and film the police when we see them, and let's do it every Saturday night. But it has to be community involvement, something similar to the original Black Panther Party and other civic organizations like that. So that's my thoughts.
Absolutely, and again, spot on, Mikey. Coming to you, David. How do we take these videos that are being used and take them from the realm of entertainment and put them into some sort of legislative arena where laws can be changed? What changes need to be made at the higher level in order for the work that's being done on the ground with these videos to make a change of the lives of the individuals that is affecting on the street?
It seems to me that what Seth has pointed at in terms of a law being created that allows the jury to only see videos as a judge instructs them or a prosecutor instructs them to see it instead of letting them see it as their eyes and their ears see and hear it. There's something grotesquely Orwellian and perverse about that when I am instructed how to see evidence with my own senses, it seems to me you no longer need a jury. You just need a backboard, somebody to echo to you what you want to hear. There's something about putting the power to bully American citizens into the hands of subnormal, low-intelligent, sadistic apes in police uniforms that makes my blood boil. But it seems to me the only way we are ever going to have the effect by using these videos that Mike pointed out on YouTube is we have to make the police the bozos, incompetents, and criminals that they are. We need to expose them. The focus on the victim, we know, has no effect in the American system. Because who are the victims? Mentally ill people who no one cares about, black people who no one wants, Hispanic people who they're waiting on Trump to send back to Mexico, and poor people who should have died long time ago, and sick people who should die today. So nobody is going to be affected or persuaded by videos showing the suffering and injustice of the victim. So what you have to do, and Mike is doing this, is to turn the whole focus on the sadistic apes in the police uniform. Make them the enemy. Focus all your power on them. And then put the tagline, today the black, tomorrow you. Today the Hispanic, tomorrow you. Today the poor, tomorrow you. And begin to indoctrinate the American people with the concept that the only reason they're safe in their beds tonight is not because a policeman is on the street, but because the Americans have taken the policeman off the street.
Listen, before we move on very quickly, just please do remember to follow all our tweets on @IssuesTodayShow and @TeamDenMom, and just follow us on the Issues Today page. And all of this that's been going on today will be available for you to view again later on tonight or tomorrow as soon as the show is uploaded. Now, I just want to add another piece of thought from the production team, which is when white individuals engage in criminal activity up to and including mass shootings, in many cases the perpetrator is not killed, and mental health is almost always raised as a factor. Clearly he was unstable, is what most people would probably say, and he had a history of mental health, etc. However, this typically results in a call to reform gun control and the mental health qualifications related to it. The social crime, per the philosopher Foucault, of mental illness in this case gets deflected to the national argument on Second Amendment issues. Conversely, persons of colour, homeless persons, etc., get shot whether or not they have been engaging in criminal activity. They are victims rather than perpetrators, and the social crime is considered sufficient to merit capital punishment levied on the street level. In these cases, mental health is almost invariably ignored as a mitigating factor, and the argument really arises that reform on policing and the justice system is merited. And once again, this actually just goes on to say that when a homeless person or a black person or a person of colour suffers with mental health, it carries a death sentence. If you find yourself in trouble with the law or encountering an officer who finds it difficult to understand what you're saying or doing or communicate with you, his first response is to pull his gun out of the holster, and the likelihood is you may well be shot dead. Having a mental illness should never warrant you to lose your life. And in fact, more consideration needs to be given to how you got yourself into that place in the first place, and a more supportive approach be used. But Cephas, we are actually getting to that point where we are almost at an end. And I'd like you to just, in this particular moment, give a shout out to any of the organizations and links that people can go to in order to support the work that you do.
Right. Okay. Well, the first let me say this really quick, and then I'll jump on that. The ACLU here in the state of California formed this mobile justice site, which is about an application you could download to your cell phone, so that when you film the cops, it can automatically go to the ACL database of filming the police. And then from that, I believe with the ACLU building this database, we can take that information and show statistically just how heinous this act is and how important recording the police is when it comes to dealing with the police. Now, I'm the co-founder of the Love Not Blood campaign, which is located at www.lovenotbloodcampaign.org. And there you can go to our website and see the work that we do, the families that we work with, and of course meet and hear and see other organizations that we work with. There's so many that I can name off, but again, like Mikey is doing, Cop Watch is a very important aspect of this movement. We must train members of our community in how to videotape and record policing and to stop the narration that can interfere with the interpretation and understanding of what occurred. So I won't go into that deep, but I want to cite one more thing, and that is Kenneth Chamberlain was 62 years old, had a medical device hanging around his neck because he had a heart issue, and he accidentally pushed the button. And this is an example of just how heinous these police are when it comes to people that are sick. When they came to his door, he told them it was an accident. He didn't need them to come in his house. They tore his door actually killed this man who was an ex-Marine, retired from the United States military, minding his own business, accidentally hit his pendant and was killed. And yet not one person has been held accountable for that murder. This happened on a regular and consistent basis. I want to thank you, Kervin, for allowing me to be on the show. I want to thank your listeners for listening and hearing what's happening here in the United States. And it's my hope that you do your own investigation, that everything that I may have said or anyone have said, investigate it just to find out for yourselves, because we need you. This is a call to action. This show is about us all being a part of bringing real freedom, justice, and equality to all. Again, go to the Love Not Blood campaign website, and you can see the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Once again, I want to thank every single one of you that have taken part on the show. Cephas, thank you very much. Mikey's blue hair, I want to thank you very much. Dr. David, I want to thank you very much. The production team of Ninjet, Sharon and Linda, I want to thank you all very much for all the hard work that you guys have done. And it's time to call it a day today. We're going to be back same time next week, along with Alex Salazar and Justin Powers, where we're going to be looking at the systemic racist policing of the United States of America and how it's affected people over the generations. But I just do want to, and Tim Best Buds is going to be here, because we're also going to have a quick look at the Kendrick Johnson show, which, unfortunately for us, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have